Hello, everyone. Hato, and welcome to session 1 of the Indigenous Women Artists and Activists. I'm Renee Goki, a citizen of the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma and the Teacher Services Coordinator at the National Museum of the American Indian. I'll be facilitating tonight's workshop. During this 3-part teacher workshop series, you will be introduced to the intersection of Indigenous artists and activism. We'll use the museum's Essential Understandings Framework and artworks by contemporary Indigenous artists to examine ways that students might use art to learn about difficult historical events and tie this to contemporary issues. Tonight, the visual artist America Meredith will explore art from the museum's collection as well as her own. Classroom materials from the Native Knowledge 360 National Education Initiative will be provided in the chat and also sent afterwards via email. All attendees will receive a certificate of participation at the end of the evening. As with our in-person programs, we generally start with a land acknowledgement. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose ancestral homelands that we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. So I did want to acknowledge the Piscataway Nation, the tribe of people from this region in which we have friendships, and you see in the picture Piscataway people at the grand opening of the museum. Land acknowledgements are used to recognize Indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of the lands on which we now live and work. They are a simple first step in creating collaborative, accountable, continuous, and respectful relationships with Indigenous Native nations and communities. So we encourage you to go further. And there will also be in the chat, when we're mentioning particular resources, those will be included as well. So you'll see that there. Many of you may already do land acknowledgements in your classroom. And for those of you looking for more guidance, the document is in the chat there. And we also have a recorded webinar about land acknowledgements if you're seeking a deeper dive. The National Museum of American Indian, which is part of the Smithsonian Institution, is a complex of museums, libraries, a zoo, and multiple research centers. We have 2 exhibition locations, one in Washington, D.C. on the left, one in New York City, which you see a picture of in the center, and the heart of our collection and our research facility and access to the collections is at our Cultural Resources Center, which you see on the right, where we steward over 800,000 objects that are in our care and connect them to the Indigenous communities here today. By being part of this workshop, teachers like you are contributing to the newly acquired mission statement and vision statement that we have here. So our new vision statement says that equity and social justice for Native peoples of the Western Hemisphere through education, inspiration, and empowerment. So our mission has always been in partnership with Native people and their allies. Our museum fosters a richer, shared human experience through a more informed understanding of Native peoples. So it's so nice to see all of you joining us. Welcome. Native Knowledge 360, or NK360 for short, is our national education initiative to transform teaching and learning about Native Americans. And again, we couldn't do this work without you. We know that this is generational work, and we have done both research studies, textbook studies, and built different frameworks around sort of transforming teaching and learning and providing content and different pedagogical strategies in collaboration with you in the classroom. So thank you so much for all that you do. The purpose of this 3-part teacher workshop series is really to bring to light for teachers and students historical and contemporary issues that are important in Native communities through artwork from the museum's contemporary collection. The program will focus on global issues that affect all of us and that is spearheaded by Indigenous women, such as representation, activism, environmental and water protection, or social justice. So over the 3-part series, you will see these themes addressed. Next, I want to tell you about our essential understandings. So this is part of the framework that the museum has developed. We followed the National Council for the Social Studies. As many of you know, that's often where Native Americans are placed in the curriculum. And of course, we want to expand beyond that, but we developed this as a tool for you so that you have language that you can use and key concepts that follow those 10 themes of the National Council for Social Studies to help bring teaching to your classroom about Indigenous groups. For example, one example, a small example might be around culture. So in American Indian cultures, one of the key concepts is that there's no single American Indian culture or language. So there's lots of different opportunities to share about the many different Native cultures to highlight this point. And for example, you're going to be hearing from a Cherokee presenter today. So be sure to seek out other Cherokee perspectives in addition, and we'll give you some different resources to do that as well. So let's start with asking you in the chat, what does it mean to you? What does activism mean to you? What does it mean to be an activist? So I'm hearing speaking your truth. Love that. I think that's really going to resonate and come up tonight. To be a voice. Yes. Speaking up for something you believe in. Yeah. Supporting. Yeah, there are ways you can do that. Absolutely. Keeping my culture alive. Recognizing the truth in history. Absolutely. You as teachers, being an ally, listening to all voices. Spend your time using your voice for others who may not have the opportunity. An active ally. Be vocal. Contribute to a better future. Take action. Teach the truth. Spend the time to learn. I really like that. Make the invisible visible. It's great. These are great. Those are fantastic responses. Thank you so much for sharing. So all of these, passing truth to students, what you believe in. I love these. Yeah. Very good. Thank you for sharing. So today we'll be hearing from the art and the artist to help to catalyze conversations around Indigenous women's activism and increase awareness of issues that are important. Let's take a look at a painting by the artist that will be speaking with us tonight, America Meredith from 2011. It's called Mary Golda Ross, Ad Astra per Astra. We'll do a thinking routine. We're going to use the chat today. It's called See, Think, Wonder. So some of you might be familiar with it. And we again have a link to that. And this routine encourages different types of thinking. In particular, students are asked to make careful observations and describe what they see. So that's what we'll be doing first. So it can often be challenging not to jump into making inferences. But first, we're just going to slow down for a moment and really look carefully at the painting and describe what you see when you look at this painting. Please use the chat. What do you see? I see the dark colors of space, the universe. Cherokee words, stars, a woman in a red dress, a white symbol, Cherokee text, a rocket, the horizon. You're seeing the lake and trees, water, figures in the sky. There's poise. Somebody is mentioning poise. These are great observations. You all have wonderful observations. And I want you to add a little bit about what you think about what you see. So use the chat. And use language in the chat if you can to connect what you observed to why you think what you do. So for example, one of you said a poised woman. So can you kind of tie that then to maybe how she's standing, or what is it that that makes you say that? So we're seeing an elder. So you're thinking about an elder teaching the younger generation. Maybe she's distinguished. She seems responsible for. Okay. I think we saw a matriarch, a teacher. Ooh, this is going so fast. It is hard to keep up with. Must have a connection to aerospace engineering. Yep, presenting something about space. An Indigenous woman sharing her truth. I like that. The woman is larger in the picture. To me, this shows she played an important role. These are great observations and really good thinking. So this part of the routine asks students to use reasoning skills, what I'm asking you to do, and ask for evidence in the painting to sort of back up what you observe and what you see. And this is really an accessible technique for all sorts of students. So finally, let's look at the painting more closely. And I want to ask, what do you wonder when you look at this painting? So I see, who is Mary Golda Ross? Relationship. Okay, I'm going to jot this down. Development of time. 7-pointed star. What was her role? Okay. Yep, her contribution to space. What is that? Yeah, when you're gonna, I see there's some questions to the artist, so that's great. You're gonna get to hear a little bit more from America. So I'll tell you a little bit. So Mary Golda Ross is she was a Cherokee woman. She was born in Park Hill, Oklahoma in 1908, and she earned a bachelor's degree at age 20 in mathematics from Northeastern State Teachers College. And this was formerly the Cherokee Seminary School and was the first institution of higher learning for women west of the Mississippi. So the Cherokee people established that. She later earned a master's degree in Colorado, and at that time she took lots of astronomy classes. So with the aircraft, some of you asked about the aircraft, she taught math and science in rural Oklahoma during the Great Depression, also time my grandparents grew up in Oklahoma. And Ross was hired as a mathematician by Lockheed in 1942. So after the war, she was sent to UCLA for a degree in engineering. And they saw so much potential in her. They encouraged her to go back to school. They actually supported her. And she, in 1952, joined the Skunk Works program, which was secret at the time. She worked on interplanetary space travel designs and early studies of orbiting satellites. So she does hold the distinction of being the first Native American female engineer, and her work in the 1950s was crucial to the development of the United States space program. So that, I think that's really exciting, and we could say definitely more about her. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up, is that when you do this kind of, I'm seeing extraordinary and amazing, yeah, she really is. She really is an amazing person. And when you do this type of thing with your students, a see, think, wonder routine, it draws out curiosity. You may not be able to answer every question about Mary Golda Ross or the painting you're looking at, but it really helps to build that curiosity, and it sets the stage for deeper inquiry. It also lays a path forward for learning and modeling for students that learning is not an ending point, but instead more about asking deeper, richer questions and deepening our thinking. So now that we're all more curious about the painting, let's hear from our special guest, America Meredith, who is, again, a visual artist. She's a Cherokee Nation citizen and the publishing editor of the first American art magazine, which is a really phenomenal publication. Yes, she has done so much great work, and she's a real joy to be around. I just wanted to mention before she gets started that we're including the Cherokee Nation website in the chat. Please go there. She mentioned OCO tonight, the TV station. I mean, there's just so many great resources. We also have a Native Knowledge 360 lesson plan about removal, not only Cherokee, but other tribes. And America's paintings are featured in the museum's contemporary art collection, 7 in total. She's going to introduce us to her work this evening and help us think more broadly about American Indian women painters and art as activism. Thank you, America.
Thank you, Renee. This is a complete honor to be here tonight. And I can't believe you guys have so many ideas in the chat. After a full day of work, teachers are heroes. So I really appreciate you taking the extra time after your incredibly busy day and the important work you do to spend time here. But Yeah, and I do tend to, I kind of one of those people that might ramble. So, Renee, feel free to interrupt me or get me back on track. I'm coming to you tonight from my home in Norman, Oklahoma, which is the ancestral homeland of the Wichita and affiliated tribes. They've been here since time immemorial. And in Oklahoma, sometimes, sometimes we were forget that these are other people's lands. So I descend both from Cherokee people that walked the Trail of the Tears that were forced to go, and then also the early settlers that came out, before the Trail of Tears. So essentially they saw the writing on the wall, they saw the way things are going, and even though it wasn't ideal, they came out early. So Sequoia, who single-handedly invented the Cherokee celebrity that we use, he was also an early settler, and his remains, he became ill and he died, but he's in Mexico. So Cherokee people did get around even in the old days. And last year was the 200th anniversary of him presenting his celebratory to the Cherokee Council. So it's been really exciting to celebrate 200 years of our unique writing system. And I am a painter. That's just, as an artist, that's what I am, So I went to grad school at San Francisco Art Institute, which is really, it is a place, it's kind of a joke, but the people would give themselves an enema for a class project, and people would sit around and analyze it, so it's very experimental school. So people would be like, well, why are you going to grad school for painting? Like, why would anyone do that? Painting's so old hat. So I've had I work really slowly, so I have many hours to defend a painting in my brain, right? So I think it's like music or singing or dancing. People have been painting for tens of thousands of years. So I think it's just a human expression. I think it will never die. It's just something that humans instinctively do, from cave walls, sending out to space. There's so many things we can do with paintings. And I do think it's not a neutral ground. I think when you're painting things, typically, not always, but you're honoring it, you're spotlighting it, the time and beauty and energy that you're putting into it. Is kind of, it is an honoring. You're putting something up on a pedestal. So I could, paint horrible people, but I'd much rather spend that energy on, exploring things. And I do think sense of humor is incredibly important. I think when we're joking or being humorous, we're being really creative. So I do think, you got to be careful about what you joke about. That's something my brother and I always used to say, is anything you make fun of, you become. So I think humor is so creative. So all my paintings, how as you get older, you just lean into who you are. My paintings all have this wonky quality. I just have this goofy quality. So it's not going away. I'm never going to be incredibly sophisticated. And you can see, there is kind of this wonkiness, but that's just who I am, and that's what my art is. So this is actually, I use this as kind of an introduction to myself and, who I am, where I'm from. I'm very fair-skinned, as you can see. Both my grandmothers are Swedish Americans. I do not have a clan. But after my father passed, my father, single largest influence in my entire life, he was a teacher, he was an educator. But, after he passed, I found these great black and white negatives that he hadn't developed. So, they're like, 48 years old, and they were still able to be developed. And there were photos of my little sister and me in Gore, Oklahoma. This is our ceremonial ground. It's a press ground. It's been put to sleep right now, but they're hoping they reawaken it again. So this is Medicine Spring Grounds. We're in the background, and then in the foreground is Archie Sam, who, as a kid, I was just like, hey, it's Archie Sam. I didn't know he was special, but he was a ceremonial leader. He's a medicine man. He's a really amazing person with a lot of amazing stories. But he's Nachi and Cherokee. The Nachi people were absorbed into the Cherokee people when the French routed them in 1732. So they ended up also doing that forced migration. As Renee said, so many tribes were forced into not only Oklahoma, but Kansas and Texas. There was a lot of forced removals. And I think that is, when you talk about land acknowledgements, that's something the United States, we really have to be aware of and address. But anyway, so I'm so lucky, yes, I'm what's called a thin blood. A lot of people find that offensive, but the second I turned that term, I really appreciated it because it's who I am. I still deeply care. I'm invested in my tribe, but I totally acknowledge that, I'm also Swedish American. So I'm glad that there's that space for me to be who I am. And then if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so Cherokee people, I think everyone knows the word Cherokee, but when it comes to scratching the surface and actually knowing about Cherokee, it's a much harder. And until recently, most of the books, most of the information available, especially online, is just absolute garbage. Like, I'm sure as teachers, you really vet your sources and look like, who wrote this? So now there's just, the internet, plus we've been stuck at home, so everyone's been creating. But oh my God, there's so many incredible resources about Cherokees because we're three gigantic tribes. So I think I put it in the discussion, but so I'm Cherokee Nation, which is the largest, but then there's also in Oklahoma, the United Katua Band of Cherokee Indians. And the Katua is our mother mound. It's where Creator gave us the law. So that word's really important to us. And then the ones that were able to stay behind in our ancestral homelands where we've been for thousands of years, Eastern North Carolina, the Qualla boundary, those are the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. So those are the three tribes. And this, what's being portrayed here, this is my friend's wedding. And there was just such a feeling of optimism and lightness. It was just beautiful. So I really wanted to portray that, but they're very, very culturally engaged. So the first thing they did was a friendship dance. So as a cultural people, we've lost a lot. It's just the God's truth. And then when it comes to stomp dances, we're, different tribes share songs. I think almost all Eastern tribes do stomp dance, and many of our songs are, actually Muskogee Creek or Nachi, but the friendship dance is Cherokee. We start our dances with the friendship dance, and is the first song Creator ever gave us. So the fact that we still have that today is just, to me, mind blowing. But anyway, next slide. Yeah, so I really was interested because I've read James Adair was this he was this Irish trader, and he married it, whatever, he had lots and lots of kids because he loved Cherokee ladies. So I'm a descendant of this person, and then he moved down south inland with the Chickasaws. A lot of Chickasaw people are descended from him too. So in the 1700s, he described women. Cherokee women were weaving mats of mulberry bast. Bast is that kind of, plant material that's kind of in between the outer bark and the inner heartwood in mulberries, in saplings. They would make these beautiful white cloths from mulberry bark, and then they would paint them. So they'd paint animals, they'd paint people, and then Muskogee Creek women, they would paint human forms on the outside of their houses. So women, not all tribes did women paint figuratively, paint people, but for Eastern tribes, absolutely, women painted figuratively, but none of this exists. So I was so fortunate. The National Museum of the American Indian gave me the Artist Fellowship grant where you get to go. Letting an artist into the museum collections is like life-changing. My life was definitely changed by this, but unfortunately I saw that absolutely nothing like this. Like, these paintings I read about exist today. So I posed this question to myself: how can I make the most Cherokee painting I can? So our writing system is absolutely I think it's like the biggest signifier, of Cherokee identity. Sorry, I read really slow, so I might not be able to catch up on these, but lettering words. They tend to just be descriptive. My Cherokee's really rudimentary. My knowledge of the language, I used to be good. I took classes, and then I've kind of fallen off that path, but maybe someday I'll get back on it. But it's a syllabary. So if you guys speak Hebrew, or if you know katakana or hiragana, different cultures around the world have their own syllabic writing system. So this is very slowly uti lis diga ali lo do di ama. Ama's water, so ama, that's water. And so what this is a formula. So we have these incantations or medicinal formula, and we have thousands of them, and they're incredibly beautiful, just wonderful imagery, very poetic, unique to us. You cannot do them unless you're using this exact, the words have to be perfect. They have to be in Cherokee, they have to be pronounced properly, so I can't do them. They're often in very archaic forms of the language. So I have talked to elders, I'm like, is it okay I'm doing this? It's like, sure, because there's no way to create the original words from this. It's only kind of a description, general. And there's a whole continuum of what these medicinal formula can do. So they can do horrible, really horrible things. And I stay over in the G-rated side of things. So this is an incantation to make water boil more quickly. So you think of crawdads, or some people call them crayfish, but anyway, crawdads, you know, they're kind of purple bluish in the water, but the second you put them into boiling water, they turn bright red. So you can see how people would draw upon that imagery. And I always, you know, that's something they beat in my head in grad school, is like, you have to put your own life in times, you know. So I like ramen, so those are ramen noodles. And this actually, sorry, I'm doing an aside, but you know, my BFA show happened to be on my sister's birthday, so she had to spend her birthday at my art show. So I put little things in each of these for my sister. So in this, one of the noodles spells out her name in Cherokee, which is Lee. But anyway, so next we can move forward. And then this, I'm proud of this painting. I think it's one of the best paintings. So I did teach in college, and this was one of my students. So Carla Blue Dawn, so she's Eastern Band Cherokee descent, and then she's African American too. And what she's doing, this long title, is she's calling upon these bird spirits to re-beautify herself. So that's just giving you charisma, so physical beauty, but also the ability to talk and all these other things. So there's a lot of love incantations, and there's a lot of like beauty and charisma. There's a lot about that. That was high priority for early Cherokee people. But she's calling on a fishing hawk, which is also an osprey, and she's calling on this kind of a mythological or archaic giant bird, you know, and then she's calling on red tobacco and blue tobacco. And when we get back to the Mary Golda Ross, you'll see this too. But we Cherokees have 7 directions, and I thought we were all cool, but a lot of tribes have 7 directions. You have the east, west, north. Sorry, we have a lot of coming and going with the dogs. East, west, north, south. Then we have above, below, and center, right where you're at. And that's actually surprisingly common. Okay, the dogs are getting rowdy. But yeah, so all these directions also have colors that correspond to them. And you might be familiar maybe with Zuni fetishes, where they have 6 directions, and they all have colors, and then they have animals. And tribe to tribe to tribe, you'll have these different configurations, and often they're all different. So even a medicine man in one particular tribe might have a different medicine wheel or color configuration than someone else. So we have kind of a common one, but then Redbird Smith is a really important ceremonial leader from the 1800s. He had a totally different one. So, but I use our kind of our mainstream one, mainstream Cherokee. But red is east, and that's very common with a lot of cultures throughout the world. But red is east. It is the rising sun. It's victory. It's blood. It's war. So yeah, I mean, you were asking about the red and white star. We can get into that. And then blue is north, and it's longing and sorrow. But you can see kind of in a spell about love that, you know, oh, love longing, that other people are longing for this person. And then purple is kind of this witchy color, basically, you know, so all these colors, and brown is below the earth. So all these colors have different significance. So that's something I use consistently. And a couple other Cherokee artists, you'll see this. So you might look for red and blue, or red and white. You'll see that a lot in Cherokee art, blue being sorrow or loss. And then you think about blues, the music. That's really easy to remember that. But yeah, so can we go to the next one? And I'm not sure, tobacco, I believe, came from the Amazon, but it's one of the few things that traveled from North America to South America. So it came all the way from South America and completely revolutionized our ceremonial cycles. So the plants are allies. We can just skip to the next one, but that's the title of the next series. And it's very topical right now because, of course, we're in a pandemic. But you think about all the pandemics before, you know, we think of the 1918 one, but then, you know, the 90% of the indigenous peoples in the Americas to 95% died from introduced diseases. And these are animal-based diseases because there wasn't this livestock. I'm like, we took baths in the old days. But anyway, you know, so there's a Cherokee story about how all the animals are sick of humans hunting them, right? So they're like, they got in council and they're like, each animal's like, I'm going to invent a disease to get those humans back. So this is definitely something we're experiencing right now. And the plants heard this and they decided, the plants met in council, and I've really racked my brain. How do I paint that? Because I definitely want to paint the plants in council. But they decided humans were okay and they were going to protect the humans. So the plants each species of plants pledged that they would create a cure for every disease that the animals created. And that's a view that we have, that a lot of people have, that there's no such thing as a weed, that every plant has something it can do, some value. So when I was a depressed, moody high school student, I used to draw this all the time. This symbol really kind of made me happy because I was, it was the 80s, nuclear war. I was worried about environmental collapse. We're kind of seeing that happen right before our eyes. But I read about the Mid-Atlantic Trench, and the flatworms that live down there. And I was just like, oh my God, we can do so much to disrupt ecology, but we can't kill the planet. We can't kill life. Like, life will always find a way. So I use this term a lot, the meek, and it is from the Bible, but the meek shall inherit the earth. And, you read now about all these, these bacteria that can eat plastic, and there's a bacteria in Chernobyl that can eat the radiation. You're like, oh my God, like, life is amazing. Life will absolutely find its way. So that's kind of the point of that. That's a bean plant. People get really excited about corn and the three sisters, but they leave out beans. Beans are really important. But next slide. And these are all indigenous plants, I should say. But so this is one that some people in Oklahoma are able to grow. It's interesting. I'm not even kidding. My dad told me this, but when the tribes were relocated to Oklahoma, you have all these medicine men, and they're coming from all these different environments. And our homeland in the Great Smoky Mountains, I hope you guys have visited. If you don't, go when like no one else is around, and it'll be pandemic safe. But it's one of the most biodiverse places in the Americas. And that includes places like Costa Rica, like it's neck and neck with places like that. So there's carnivorous plants, there's deep woods. So this bloodroot that a lot of Eastern tribes used, it grows in the deep woods. So some people have been able to grow it, and it's also medicine. So don't eat it unless you feel ready to take an adventure. So when you slice open the root, a red liquid comes out like blood, hence the name. Hey, but it's used for this amazing dye. So these baskets you see from these river cane baskets you see from the Southeast, that with this beautiful, rich, like mahogany red, it comes from this plant. So it's really an amazing plant. But I think very allegorically, But culture is the vaccine for mass culture, and the idea that kids, like, you instill culture before they're subjected to all this advertising. Because I always feel like it's a push-pull, that we want to be humans, we want our spiritual needs met, and we don't want to be put in a box. We don't want to be created as marketing demographics. So that's what that's about. So next. And then on the subject of activism, I was like, oh no, I have to include this, because this is something, a lot of these are things I wrestle within myself, but I used to curate the Bay Area Anarchist Book Fair art show. So, I love anarchists, like, they're awesome. They're the most idealistic people. But, there's kind of the joke. It's like, you become so reactionary you're so against everything. What are you for? So my friend who just recently departed, Damon Vauteur, we co-curated this show called Anti. And it was kind of heckling this idea of, being so against things, how are you ever going to achieve anything? You can't be reactionary. So this is about looking inward, finding your own power. And for Native people, looking in culturally, or, for any culture around the world, looking culturally, like, what are the answers? And this is a sunflower, and I'm really happy Caddo family has this painting, the original painting. But sunflower is one of the first crops. The southeastern United States is one of the cradles of civilization where agriculture was invented, independent of Mesoamerica. And they started with gourds, but also sunflowers. So a lot of the crops they use, we don't really use today, but pumpkin, squash, and gourds absolutely are very important. So this is just a reminder that it's like, breathe in a situation, breathe, and then come from within your own strength, your own power. And I also think, and two of my artist heroes, fellow Cherokees, are Joseph Erb and Roy Boney, and they're why all the smartphones, all the computers come with Cherokee Celebrate, with the linguist Durbin Feeling. He's Cherokee, he's departed, but he was really amazing. And they just dreamed, wouldn't it be so cool for people to text each other in syllabary? And before they did it, they used to paint on gourds. They would just paint paintings of these kind of Mississippian or pre-contact, warriors texting or on their computers. And I love it. I'm like, the future belongs to those people that can envision the future. So they did it. And now you'll have Cherokee elders, these first speakers, that'll totally be on Facebook or texting, in Cherokee. I love it. But anyway, next. There's probably a better way to say next. But anyway, so, okay, I'm in grad school and I'm defending painting. But so I created these original paintings and then reproduced them and made them into plant tags. So I love the fact that they can be reproduced. And I do love the fact that I was in San Francisco, there's a lot of street art and graffiti, but I like the idea of finding kind of public art interventions that aren't destructive, I've had my house graffitied and it's with gang graffiti and it's not fun. So I don't want to do that to anyone else, right? So it's like, if you don't like it, you can just take it off the plant, take it away, so low impact. But it's kind of fun at Indie Market. I love the fact that you can pack it up and take it anywhere. But so I have these 7 paintings and I can put them anywhere. And of course, Virgin Superstore's no longer with us, but this is and sometimes maybe I might be too obvious, but the idea that, here's this, you're in this huge city, but here's this plant, here's this tree, and this tree is your ally. This tree has been around, this type of tree has been around for thousands, millions of years, maybe, and it'll be there long after all this crazy stuff is gone too. So, just reminding to look at a big picture. But anyway, next slide. Yeah. So here's our lovely Oklahoma State Capitol. Our governor is a Cherokee Nation member. So it's like, well, you can be Cherokee and still not cool. But anyway, again, the idea of the meek shall inherit the earth. And, you've probably heard a lot with Native American perception of leaders that you have to be humble. The leader has to serve the people, so I think that's always really important to remember. And at the bottom is actually the tribal flag plaza. So all the tribes except the Kickapoos are represented. So the Kickapoos are like, we never had a flag. We're not making one now. And I really kind of admire that. But anyway, next slide. And I like how this is versatile and plays. So, how arcane and non-spontaneous can you possibly be? I got really excited. And again, back to this idea of like, how do people paint in the old days before Europeans came? And then I learned some, I was researching and I learned some, and then I got really grossed out and like not interested anymore. So I'll share it with you. But my dogs are doing wrestling for your benefit. But we use a lot of beer oil, rendered beer oil, and animal fat. So that's not archival. But for paint, as a binder, they use the liquid from a deer eye. So once I heard that, I'm like, I'm out. I do not care. But paint is a binder, but it's also pigment, and those are. I'm always hesitant to use the word universal, but they're very widely dispersed. So red ochre that people used, Neanderthal people used red ochre, and you can buy powdered red ochre in a store today. And I love the fact that, so with egg tempera, you typically use egg yolk. So I don't know if anyone used egg tempera here prior to contact, but they could have. I mean, there are eggs, you use egg yolk. It is archival. It's the second oldest known form of painting. So you think of those beautiful Fayum portraits that are the first naturalistic portraits around the first century. I guess it's kind of that connection between Greek and Roman and Egyptian people, but they used egg tempera to achieve that effect. So you can do amazing things. You can see this is only 7 inches by 5 inches. It's Gukwe Atanutsta, so that's young woman, a quail young woman. So my names tend to be really, really descriptive. But usually people use chicken eggs, and I was doing egg tempera, and it's really fun. You make your own paints, so you are using this very ancient, pigments, these mineral pigments that people have used. So I like that connection, that earthiness. And some of this is painted with just fancy dirt in a nutshell. But yeah, I was like, well, chickens are from here, can you paint with quail eggs? And if you know quail eggs, they're teeny. You can, but why? But anyway, it's like, this is incredibly hard. How can we make this harder? But so this woman is, from the turn of the century, or maybe late 19th century. She's Cherokee, and like many Native people, people dress in the fashion of their time. So that's something I've really kind of tried to get in my head and discuss with. It's funny, I don't talk about Cherokee culture with non-Cherokees a lot, so this is a different experience. But this idea that we need to not try to conform to other people's expectations of what Indian is. Like, they're wrong. Like Alex Baldwin, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. James Baldwin, the African-American writer, he had a really lovely quote about that way in regard to African-American people. It's like, no, they don't know who we are. We need to disregard what the mainstream world thinks of us, and we need to embrace our own history and who we are as a people. We need to stop trying to conform or second guess other people's expectations. So yes, this woman is wearing, jewelry, the fashion of the times, a little neck ribbon. But that is our story as a people. We have people, many different types of Cherokee people, but it's like, we need to embrace who we really are and not try to re-envision ourselves. But anyway, so next slide. And it is fun. Some of this is kind of indulgent, but I think you kind of have to defend the idea of beauty, but I think beauty is really important. And I think if we can bring beauty into the world, we should. And as painters, color is everything. I think as painting that we have access to a range of colors, beyond almost the human eye. So if you ever get to see this in real life, do, because there's all these fun interference and pearlescent colors that kind of shimmer. It's mica. I don't know if you guys know mica. It's in lipstick. It is this, it's a silicate. It's like glass, but it bends. It's so weird. But it is super common, but it's something Cherokees use. So when we painted our houses, we paint with lime and mica. And you probably know micaceous pottery, where there's little flecks of this mica, and it makes it shimmer and shine. So it was fun. A little indulgent painting space. I could use these interference colors that kind of look, greener or bluer or purpler, depending on what direction. So that was a joy. So yes, you guys picked up everything. I'm like, yay, the painting worked. But so it's called ad astra per astra. And you probably know the old Latin phrase. I think it's, y'all be cool. Cool. They've been sleeping all day. But anyway, I think it's enough puppies. All right, y'all get kicked out. Sorry, intermission, dog intermission. Out. Intermission. Thank God this isn't a corporate meeting because I'm wearing striped socks. But anyway, yeah, so her name, so this is just her name spelled out. So it's not fancy, it's not anything complex, but it's Meli. We don't have an R. So Meli, and then the next word is, it's really interesting, Adela, which is the word for, I love that word. It means silver, but it also means money, but it also means shell, because in the old days we would use shells for currency, a certain type of shell. And then Dahlonega, so that's yellow, and you might know Dahlonega, Georgia is a town today. So Adela Dahlonega together is yellow silver. So that's what gold's called, because gold wasn't really important to us too much. But anyway, and then Losi, because again, we don't have the R. So a lot of Eastern Band people have the name Losi or Losia, and it's kind of related to Ross. So that's just her name, transliterated. And then, yeah, so there you might see, she does have this headshot. So I went to the thrift store and I got what I thought would be a dress that kind of matched the pearls, And I love that she's wearing pearls, because that's something that Southeastern women actually wore pre-contact. Like freshwater pearls. People would just drape themselves with ropes and ropes of these beautiful freshwater pearls. So I love the fact that she might have known that. She might have been aware of that because I believe, and please correct me, Renee, if I'm wrong, but I think her great grandfather, otherwise it'd be her great grandfather, was Chief John Ross, he was a chief for an incredibly long time. He's Scottish and Cherokee, and he's the one who fought removal. He really tried to stay in the homelands, but he ended up going the Trail of Tears. He went along with the Trail of Tears, and then he was a chief when we got here, and we had our brief golden age when things were like going well. And we were able to start in 1851, 1851, the male seminary and the Cherokee female seminary. So we had this, I'm sorry, I get to brag a little bit. We had this incredible free public school system because education was so important and it was really seen as a tool. And for a tribe to control its own education was incredibly important, so they could, make sure the kids were taken care of. Okay, so we had day schools. So there was I believe there was 150 day schools throughout the Cherokee Nation, and our literacy rate was higher than surrounding states at the time. But the day school meant you got to live in your community and then go to school and then come back. And I think there's been some books I'm not really fans of writing about these schools, but because they taught Western ways. Well, it's those were tools to get ahead. So it's and that's an interesting thing about Cherokees and other groups. I also think about themselves in this way. Chickasaws, definitely. I think the Basques in Europe, if you're aware of them, they're good looking at this too, where outsiders often equate indigeneity with being primitive or unsophisticated. But we see ourselves as early adopters of technology, so if something's useful, we'll use it. We are innovators, we're innovating things. So I actually did a whole series based on Cherokee people that are inventing things and getting patents. And my grandfather made a patent for a fuel ignition switch. So I made artwork about my grandfather's fuel ignition switch. And one time my dad said, and this really stuck with me, he's like, well, maybe the government just wants us sitting around making baskets and we should really be making fuel cell cars. And I'm like, I love baskets. But I mean, that stuck with me because I think that is a genuine thing to consider. Why would we have our cultural identity being wrapped up in the past? We need to, our oral histories cover the past, the present, and the future. Our migration story talks about when we're going to keep migrating, and eventually we will cross the great waters and reunite with our lost clans. So we've always previously looked to the future. I think right now we're in a state of reclaiming our history, which has been, for all intents and purposes, taken away from us. And this is across the board with Indigenous peoples all across the world. But so Mary Golda Ross, she loved math. She had access to it. She taught math before she ended up becoming this amazing, before she was hired by Lockheed. And she would specifically try to encourage young girls in the Great Depression, like Renee said, to embrace mathematics and don't be afraid of it. It's a tool. So like anything else. So this is her Gina space module that she did help make. And it does, I mean, this is the goofy part. It looks like a model, it looks like I should have painted full streams pulling it across the sky. But and they do say that if most of her work wasn't classified, she would have been draped with awards. Someone mentioned Hidden Figures, and that's such a good allegory. Just a good reference about how women's work, was often kind of hidden away, but also in this instance, it was classified, so we're not allowed to see it. So, and that star is our 7-pointed star. Actually, I have a tattoo. I won't show it to you. I'll do you that favor tonight. I'm not showing you my tattoo. But the 7-pointed star, and I've kind of messed it up. Usually it'll be shown with a point down. And the point of that is that no clan is more important than the other. So we have 7 clans, we have 7 directions, a 4 and 7 are both incredibly important. And you'll find numerology is very important to many tribes, and they'll all be different. So red and white is kind of a binary system, and it's white is, let's see, okay, white's the south and white is peace and tranquility. And then, like I said, red is war. So, and this isn't unique to us, all these Southeastern tribes also had binary systems of government, like in the 1700s, where you would have a peace chief and the peace, his whole entourage, and they would, often wear like white insignia, and you'd have the red chief, and the red chief would be the war chief, and he would wear red insignia. And depending on the situation, one would have, kind of be in charge. So often the white chief would take care of internal situations, and the red chief would deal with external relations. And of course, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, nonstop warfare, not by our choosing, but that's just, it's just nonstop warfare. So it is this idea of balance. And, when I talk about the colors and, blue being depression, black is the West and death. And none of these are good or bad. They just kind of are what they are. And then back to the name, sorry, I'm like being nonlinear. Ad astra per astra. So it comes from ad astra per aspera. So, that's Latin, and it's like to the stars from mud. But this is to the stars from the stars. So we, like many, 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 many people throughout the entire world, believe that we originally, us came from the stars. And like many people around the world, we think specifically from the Pleiades, which are known as the Seven Sisters. I know the Dogon tribe in Africa also, it's really interesting because they're not very prominent in the sky. So this idea that her being involved with space and being involved with this incredible technology that defies my comprehension, is actually bringing us back to where we came from. And, there is this idea like, oh, we're all stardust, that there could be actually some scientific backing of that idea. Silver thinks she invented called, oh, that's a Gina space module. So I believe, and do take everything I say with a grain of salt, a Gina space module. Yeah, and someone mentioned, and Renee might want to talk about this. Someone mentioned, is there a children's book? And I bought it after we discussed. We had a practice session. I bought it. It's really fantastic. I gave it to my niece and nephew, and I thought it was great. But anyway, yeah, if you want to. Oh, and you can see she's got the white pearls, white, and then red. Victorious. She was completely triumphant. She lived almost to 100, and it was really touching that in her will she left a vast sum to the Institute of American Indian Arts. She taught other tribes, so she was looking at encouraging all Native people, all young Native people to embrace arts and sciences. So you probably heard the discussion of STEAM. So it's STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but also with art in the middle. So I do think anything that combines science and art together is a good idea. But anyway, yeah, so I think that is the last slide. And Renee, what did we do?
Oh, America, I could listen to you all evening.
Oh, are you taking up too much time? Because there's not enough time for questions.
It's such a treat to hear. Thank you for sharing Cherokee values and stories and culture and symbolism. You just shared so much richness. And, the message I always take away from people is, this idea of really being yourself too. And I think there's a real link to activism and being yourself, finding your voice. You talked about interruption and intervention and, some of these things, but you did it with such grace, America. And again, that's kind of who you are. And so I think, everybody, can find that passion and kind of allow themselves to shine in ways that are important and things that matter to them, whether they're a quiet supporter or they're vocal. There's so many different ways to be an activist. So thank you for kind of expanding our ways of thinking. And it was really a real delight to listen to you and learn more about your art and see your work. It's beautiful. So
yeah. This might be a little plug, but if people have further questions, so First American Art Magazine is for adults, but we have a team of people. We have resources on our website, but also because we're of an age, we're mainly on Facebook, but you're welcome. All you guys are welcome to ask questions on our Facebook page at any time, and you'll get like this incredible brain trust to answer. But anyway, someone mentioned Rigoberta Menchú. Sorry, I'll shut up.
I love this connection. I'm glad you brought up First American Art Magazine because I think, it's such a great example of the way that you support other artists, the way that you use education and writing and scholarship that you've done and brought other experts in the field in and artists. It's just such a nice, and it's very much what we see in the Mary Golda Ross book as well. she supports others. She's using, Cherokee values and she's getting an education. So I think it's just such a nice parallel. And we will talk about the book in a minute, but first I want to return it back to teachers. I know there's some chat going on. I think that's fantastic. I wanted to ask if you can name a woman activist that's important to you. We probably won't be able to keep up with all of them, but I thought it'd be great to just get people thinking and sharing. And, it may be, somebody famous, and it may be your grandmother, right? It may be somebody in your family who stands by their culture, or who, America, I remember we had a great conversation early on when we first met, and you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your grandmother started basketry again in Cherokee Nation.
Oh, my great grandmother. So my great grandmother went to Cherokee Female Seminary. So I knew her when I was a baby, but she was in Cookson Hills, and Cherokee basket weavers would literally meet in this clearing in the woods. So she worked with the Methodist Church to create this community center where they could hold events and sell baskets. Again, the Great Depression really impacted Oklahoma. It was survival time, and that building's still here today. And she was in, how you see needs. she had she made them translate the Oklahoma driver's license into Cherokee, because people speak Cherokee, they don't speak English. She can't get a driver's license. And I went to the Sequoia cabin, which you can visit the cabin that Sequoia lived in, and I saw that, and it's just like this mimeograph little hoopty thing, but I'm like, oh my God, it's the Cherokee driving instruction manual.
That's so cool. That's cool. I'm getting some ideas for additional follow-up for the teachers. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm learning from all of you, some other people, and I have Jake Goodall's another favorite. Yes, hey. I'm looking forward to learning more and hearing from, going back through the chat and hearing more. So thank you so much. I want to return to the essential understandings for one moment, and the key concept that Native people continue to fight to maintain the integrity, I can't speak tonight, and viability of Indigenous societies. American Indian history is one of cultural persistence, creative adaptation, renewal, and resilience. I'd like you to take a minute to think back to the conversation tonight and just put in the chat one example that you heard tonight of one part of this key concept. And I know this language is, you might, with your students, if you want to bring a key concept in, you might change viability to live successfully or something, you can adapt it a little bit. But again, this is a tool to kind of frame your thinking. And I think supports our learning. I feel like there's many examples that came up today of this cultural persistence, like, use of the language and all of the resources that are available there in Cherokee Nation. We came from the stars. Yeah, I missed part of that. Early adopters. Yeah, early adopters of technology. America, how you said that, that's such a great example, and the literacy rates of Cherokee people, amazing historically and today. So there's all this adaptation and, people renewing themselves constantly. Sharing Native stories and history through artwork and visual storytelling. Yes. Healing plants. These are great. These are great examples. Thank you for sharing. An example that comes to mind for me is the way that America blends her painting with not only kind of her own expression, her intellect, but she includes Cherokee worldviews in ways that she really shared with us tonight. I think that's really such a gift to hear. All right, so on to the next slide. Knowing that activism may not always be reactionary, I'd like you to use the chat one more time. In what ways do you think of your existence as an act of resistance? And you might be familiar with this quote. It's been used by different groups in different contexts, but Has it been an example of you going against the status quo? You know, have you stood up in your classroom? How do you advocate for what you believe in? And they can be, you know, big and small ways. They don't have to. Does anyone have an example? People surviving their ancestors, oppression by other people in the past, raise good and thoughtful people. I love that. That's a huge, that is so important, and it can really be hard going up against mass culture, right? The mainstream culture can often be about consumerism and different things. And so really have to stand up for your values. And that can be a challenge, standing up. Allowing my students to teach me, I like that. I do what I think is best, regardless of what others think. Being here to educate others, teaching children. I'm so looking forward to going through these, offering student options, 500 years of genocide, assimilation, and removals, and I'm here. Yeah, and there are examples in a lot, and you know, in a lot of our cultures of these, right? Modeling for others the ways to understand different cultures in respectful, appropriate ways. That's beautiful. Let's stop there. You guys have great ideas, and I'm looking forward to going through more. I want to share the next slide with you, though, because I know we're running a little bit low on time. And this book, Classified, some of you, mentioned it in the chat, The Secret Career of Mary Golda Ross, the Cherokee Aerospace Engineer. It was written by Tracy Searle and illustrated by Natasha Donovan. And this is a fantastic book. We hope that you'll use it in your classroom. I saw that in the chat that some of you already do. And it's such an, like the painting, it's such a good entry point to deeper thinking and curiosity. And it can kind of help open up conversations with students around representation. So you might ask your students after they read the book or look at the artwork, whose voice is heard and whose is missing. You know, these are some of the things we see in the standards. Or you may connect Mary's story with other women's stories that you teach about already. I saw Hidden Figures was mentioned, and that was Katherine Johnson was the woman scientist mathematician that I thought of too as an example. To add multiple perspectives and integrate that into your curriculum. It's already there often as a standard. So Mary was able to find her own way against the odds in society in the 1950s that often created these barriers to women scientists. So how can we use this book, the artwork, and other things to get kids to connect that history with today? And this picture book will be diving into it much more deeply in our next session. So let's see how many minutes we have left. We have a few more minutes. Let's go back to the chat. Yeah, we have a few more minutes. We ended at 8:15, so we're good. Let's go to the chat. And I want to just turn it back to America if and all of you in the audience. Do you have any questions that you might have or that your students might have about today's content or for America while we've got her here?
People are asking a lot about recording, and I believe you said this will be recorded and available?
It will, yeah. It'll go into our recorded webinars, and actually we'll send a link to that just so you have it all handy. It won't be available right away. It'll take us a little time, but it will be available there. And there's a lot of other professional development there.
And someone asked about using the book Classified with kindergartners. I don't know if you guys have, but I think it'd be fine. Something I really love about that book is she deeply interviewed, there's all these facts known about her life, but the author interviewed Mary Golda Ross's brother to really get some, she did way more research than she needed to, but to get that personal story, I think is really great.
That's so great. And actually I talked to Tracy yesterday, in fact, and she told me, she's the author of the book, and she was saying that, what matters to her most. I mean, she's so glad that it's being picked up in classrooms, but what Cherokee people really think about it. And I guess Gail Ross, who is, related, really appreciated the book and really liked it. So she was really pleased about that too. So, always have to make sure the community, supports the book.
Someone asked such a good question. How do you keep Indian education alive in states that are prohibiting it, like Texas? Oh my gosh. But I think it's interesting because a lot of contemporary artists, Native artists, I think things are changing. Like, I think because of Black Lives Matter, and just things changing, that the public's much more receptive to hearing Indigenous voices. But scroll back, a decade ago, and I think, there's artists like Marcus Hammerman or Terry Greaves, where they really want to discuss heavy political issues or histories like genocide. So there's so many different ways that people have done it very strategically. And one is using beauty, like, oh, it's so beautiful, but also humor, but then also cartoons. And I've done that too, where I've used cartoons, oh, here, it's non-threatening. So I wonder for young children, like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Molly of Denali that's coming out of Alaska. I mean, it's really amazing, the programming that's around. But there's also fantastic comic books. So they're not threatening, they're comic books, but they also, and they're age appropriate. They're appropriate for children, but they also convey very important ideas.
Yeah, those are great examples, America. Great example.
And I know Roy Boney is involved. Oh my God, Arrogant Star, Roy Boney. There's a whole team of people that are really working on telling stories through Native comic books. So they produce all these fantastic, contemporary artists are making comic books, but I know they did one about the code talkers. So that's a really complex thing about how Indigenous languages worked in the military. And that's beyond my discussion, but it's like Native people serve in the military more than any other group. So very complex issue, but that there's comic books to address it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, those are great examples, I think. And you mentioned art too, like these are such great entry points. And that's kind of what we were hoping to do tonight is provide some entry points for teachers that are very accessible to a lot of different kinds of students.
Yeah.
And then you can go deeper. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just excited, but it's like Native people have been doing this forever. So a lot of beadwork, floral beadwork, there's discussion about that, where that's kind of underground. It's pretty flowers. So the missionaries look at it and like, oh, lovely. But it's conveying a lot of botanical information. So that might be really interesting to do with your students, is look at some beadwork and kind of imagine, well, what do these plants actually mean?
Yeah, and it's also in ribbon work too, right? All that ethnobotanical, the floral.
Yeah, all this coded information.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful and it looks decorative.
Yeah, and it conveys stories and messages and values, like all of these things that you talked about. So yeah. So let's see, there's an awful lot of questions, but I think that, that's probably something that we can discuss in another professional development. So we can think about that. And that reminds me that I want to invite you to our next session. So in this, we'll dive into the book that we discussed for a moment. And we'll also, Dr. Debbie Reese will also talk about 2 other nonfiction books that explore Indigenous women activists. And she's the founder, you might know, of American Indian Children's Literature. She's fantastic to work with. So we'll work with her again. And she'll be joined by Joanne Robertson, who is the artist and illustrator of the Water Walker book. You see her sketch here. She shared with us. And I think this is going to be a really great session around literature. And a lot of ways that you can get involved in your classroom and have your classroom become water protectors. And so there's a great movement afoot, and I don't think you want to miss the next session. We'll discuss the book as a tool to deepen student knowledge of Indigenous women's roles and their contributions. So I think it's going to be a really great session. Please join me in thanking the Smithsonian American Women's History Initiative that made this event possible. So we really appreciate their support. We will, I'm seeing in the chat, there will be links to all the resources tonight and a few new ones that I learned about and I'm inspired to include in an email afterwards. You'll get that. You'll also get a link to a survey where we hope you'll share your feedback. Let us know the types of presentations you want, professional development that you want. There is a certificate of participation in the chat. You'll see it right there. And we'll send that out again so that you'll have that. You can just take that Google slide, download it to your computer, type in your name and print, and you're good to go. So we are, again, so grateful to you, America, for your time and for sharing everything that you did.
Can I throw out one quick little thing too?
Absolutely, we've got time.
Someone brought up working with kids and cultural misappropriation, and we know used to in the old days, like, you're gonna make an Indian this, and it's like, don't do that. Terry Greaves, the beadwork artist, is a really good resource, but when she works with children that are multicultural, she always has them draw on their own cultures and their own histories. So she'll talk about beaded medallions, and then she'll give every kid like a little piece of cardboard and string and make them make a medallion with symbols important to them. So I think that that instinct's really good.
Such a good recommendation. And same thing with names and things like that, right?
Yeah, that we all have histories. We all have ancestors.
We all have histories. Starting with your students, the story of their name is such a good place to start. And it's such a nice way to kick off the school year and find out about their history and their story. So great recommendations. I'm excited to share more of these follow-up resources. Niaway, thank you, everybody. Wado in Cherokee, Wado. And we're just really, really grateful to have you and looking forward to going through the chat and hearing back from all of you teachers. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks for spending time with us.
Wadoski Nagata. Cheers. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
It was fun.